All right, guys, we will go ahead and get started. I'm sure some will be filtering in as we go the next few minutes. I appreciate y'all being flexible with not being able to go last night. So we're kind of wrapping up. We've got just a few more weeks left of our mental skills meetings. So my hope is that you're gaining some tips, some recommendations, some things that you're putting into practice now in the fall, and kind of experimenting, seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. Again, the biggest thing to remember with this is we don't necessarily have hard data. Like, we're not seeing specific numbers in our outcomes or anything like that. So your reflective piece is a really important piece of this, to kind of you have to rely on yourself to understand what's working and what's not, and that has to be a very intentional thing. So make sure that we have the questionnaire, the journals that are in the live sheet, that can kind of give you some guiding prompts, or doing something, keeping a journal yourself, just reflecting on the skills that you're using, how you're putting them into practice. Are they working? Are they not? Is there something you need to modify? Because you want to have some kind of structure with this rather than just kind of shooting by the seat of your pants and seeing, throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's not, you can start that way, but you always want to make sure you come back to something that you can look back on with some structure, and see, is this stuff really working? Or what do I need to do? Or if it is working, like, how do I continue it? How do I build off that? So just a reminder of that. Make sure you're doing something to track your progress as we're going through. You finish up the fall and then moving into the winter. If you have any questions about that, let me know. I'm happy to answer them. But we will get started on our topic for tonight. So we're continuing to build these skills. We talked about attention last week. We've gotten into kind of this idea of athlete identity. Today I want to talk about visualization. You've probably all heard this term before. Everyone does it, whether that's intentional and structured or not. Anytime you've daydreamed, anytime you've kind of thought about something, thought about an at bat, thought about an outing on the mound, that's the use of visualization. We want to talk about it in more of a structured sense for tonight. So essentially, what we use visualization for is the ability to practice without physical practice. You may hear some people say that visualization can replace practice. That's not true. Physical practice will always be the best method, but sometimes that's limited, whether it be, weather, or you don't have a space, or, you're hurt or you're tired and you just physically need a rest. That's where visualization can be a supplement. It's really good for pitchers. Obviously pitchers have limited throws that they can do. You can't go out and throw 50 pitch bullpens every day. You can't compete in a game every day. So daily reps can be hard to come by sometimes, or sometimes you just need a rest. That's where visualization can help. It can filter in and, again, supplement some of the work that you do physically on the mound, and supply that practice for you. When you are visualizing the things that you're doing, your brain is actually activating in the same way it would if you were actually doing that thing. So if all of you, like right now, if you close your eyes and you focus on your throwing motion or your swing, or your prep step as a defender, your jump as a base runner, focusing and seeing yourself do those things, or visualizing what it feels like to do those things, actually, again, activates your brain, the motor cortex and those areas of your brain, in the same way as physically doing them would. Not to the same degree, it's not the same intensity, but it still activates that brainway, or that brain pathway. And what we know from brain research is that the more you do something, the more efficient your brain gets at creating that pathway, the better you get at it. So even though we can't do the physical movement all the time every day, we can still practice those reps through visualization. I don't know how many of you know Tristan Casas. He's the first baseman for the Red Sox. He was interviewed. He's been on the IL for a few months, I think. I'm not sure if he's been activated yet, but he was interviewed maybe a month ago now, and they asked him, what he's doing to get himself prepared. And he talked about, he takes 500 swings a day. And the reporter was like, "Oh, you've been cleared for physical swings." He goes, "No, I've been doing swings in my mind. I've been taking swings, game-like swings in my mind." So physically, he couldn't swing the bat. He had an oblique injury or something like that. So he physically couldn't swing the bat, but he was doing mental reps 500, 1,000 times a day because he didn't have a whole lot else to do. And in that way, trying to keep himself mentally sharp. That's a pretty extreme example. But for those of you who maybe, your arm's sore one day or your back's hurt or you rolled your ankle or something like that and you can't physically practice, visualization can be a good way to maintain your sharpness, maintain your skills. Again, not to the same degree as practice would, but it's a way that you can continue to activate those pathways and get extra reps. Those of you that are making mechanical changes right now, visualization can be a really great way to lock in those changes before you get into the spring. There's a saying that it takes 10 years or 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at something. Not just practice, but what they call like focus practice. There's another word for it, and I'm blanking on it right now. But there's a specific kind of practice, intentional practice, focused, with a goal in mind, goal-oriented. It takes 10 years or 10,000 hours to become an expert in that. When you are making a physical change to something, you are changing your mechanics, you are changing something about the way that you play the game. When you get into a stressful situation, a game-like situation, your body relies on the most dominant response. The most dominant response is the thing that you have always done, the thing that the body can do without having to think about it. Typically, that's the thing that you used to do, right? Because it's you've done that more than the thing that you're trying to learn to do. So this time period over the next, it's September 17th. The spring season starts March 6th is the first date allowed for games. So you've got about 6 months, a little less than 6 months now, to lock in whatever these changes are, these adjustments that you're making before you get into the official season, this official spring season. Over this next 6 months, you know how it is in Colorado. We've got winter coming. You're not going to be able to get out and throw. If you have an indoor space, you'll be able to hit, but you're not going to be able to hit on a field. Visualization can make up for some of that. Okay. The changes that you're making now for them to continue and for them to become your dominant response, providing a visualization framework and adding that into the supplement as a supplement to the work that you're doing physically can be kind of a shortcut to locking in that as your dominant response. So when you get up in a situation where there's a runner on third, less than 2 outs, and it's the top of the sixth, bottom of the sixth, whatever inning it is, and you got to get that run to score, you're going to go into a stress response, right? You're going to feel nervous. You're going to feel anxious. That's completely normal. And when that happens, your body is going to go to the thing that it's most comfortable doing. If you haven't locked in these exercises, these changes that you've made, you're going to go back and revert to the thing that you don't want to do, the thing that you've been trying to change. And it may be successful, it may not be, but the changes you're making now ideally are to make you more successful. So this stuff that we're talking about, again, specifically visualization, can be a great route to do that. How many of you have some kind of experience with visualization and can share what your experience is like? How many of you use it? How many of you practice it? Have used it recently?
I think it's kind of hard for me just to get like all the shapes and movements right sometimes. But I like to use it before and after games just to review and think about what I want to do or what I could have changed.
Okay. What do you mean by the shapes and movements?
Like sometimes stuff gets distorted if it's like I'm not 100% focused.
So like when you're actually trying to picture it in your mind, it's hard to get a clear image?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
But once it locks in, it's helpful.
I think that's probably the biggest barrier is to enhance the skill of it. Because again, this is a skill. This is a thing that we have to learn how to do, and we can improve with practice. Some of us are innately better at it. Some of us aren't that good at it. So again, developing a routine of practice, the more you do this, the better you will get at it. And Graham, kind of mentioned, the distraction can be a big piece of that. So figuring out what kind of setting do I need to be in order to be able to do this. the first time, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a lot of effort to do. It's going to take a lot of focus and concentration. The better you get at it, the more efficient you'll become at it as well. So that's perfect. Using it to kind of evaluate, right? What just happened? What are going back through the game? What do I need to improve on? Anybody else? Who else has used it before? Most of you probably do, but again, maybe not in an intentional manner. I'm sure many of you go back over your at-bats after a game, right? You think about probably the bad ones more than the good ones. You may focus on that, but most of you probably do that to some degree. As a pitcher, you may go back through your inning, through your outing, the good pitches you made, the bad pitches you made. You may go back through those. That's visualization, okay? To whatever degree you use it. Some of you may actually picture what it is. Some of you may just kind of go through the script in your mind of what happened without as much of an image to that script. So what I want to move on to tonight is, how do we develop this skill? What do we actually do? The biggest piece with visualization, kind of what to what Graham was saying, is finding a distraction-free way to do it, or finding a way to limit your distractions while you're doing it. Some people will prefer to be in a relaxed state. You may do some relaxing breathing. You may try to get in a comfortable position, something like that. Some of you may not need that. That's kind of a personal decision. But the biggest piece is trying to provide as much detail as you can about whatever it is you're visualizing. So your visualization that you use in a pregame situation may be different than what you do in the middle of a game. If you have a couple hours before game time and you know something about the pitcher that you're facing, right? If you're a hitter, you faced this guy before, or maybe you've been able to find video and kind of see his mechanics and see the pitch shapes and things like that. You may want to go through a full at bat, or at least maybe like put yourself in the box facing each one of those pitches and get an idea of what it might look like, right? If you can be pretty accurate in visualization, it's like you've already taken an at-bat against this person. And we all know the more at-bats you get against somebody, the more comfortable you're going to feel. You have a better idea of what the pitch is going to do. There's so much video on Twitter now of high school players across the country. We use it as a scouting tool in the season. When I have a pretty good idea of what pitcher we're going to face, I find video of it and post it in our team chat and have our guys watch it. And so they can get a better sense of what this pitcher looks like. Get an idea of what his timing is in terms of his mechanics, right? And I'll have our pitchers, if I can find video of hitters, I'll have our pitchers do the same thing so they can get an idea of what the swing looks like. There's a lot of information that you can gather from that and then put it into your visualization, and that's a really great way to help build confidence. So giving yourself enough time to do it, especially if you're not as good at it, if it doesn't come as naturally to you. Giving yourself time to really create that visualization. And again, in as much detail as you can. If you can go out and visualize the full field, where the position, the defenders might be standing, what uniform you're going to wear. Like if you know what uniform y'all are set to wear, what uniform the other team's going to wear, the umpire behind the dish. You can visualize the dugouts and where your teammates are and all of that. Even get some noise in that with you, some things that people might say. If you can create that full scene, you're creating the setup for yourself, right? You're able to put yourself in that situation before it actually happens. And the more that we can do that, the more success we're likely to have. So our pregame routine is a really great time to utilize this as an asset, especially if you've got a lot of time. If you're kind of cramped, you're in between a doubleheader or something like that, or you're starting a little bit earlier than you thought you might, maybe you can't get into that much detail, but you can still use it. You can still maybe even focus on yourself. Again, those of you that are making mechanical changes, you're trying to lock in what that feel is. We talked about this, I think, last week. Last week, we want to think more in the game. We want to think externally. So we want to think about, what do I want to make the ball do? Pre-game, we might want to think a little bit more internally. How should my swing feel, right? That's a chance where we can really break it down and see, okay, I want my hands to be in this position. I want my load to feel like this. I want my swing to feel like this, because we don't have to worry as much about the external of tracking the ball. Maybe we can think a little bit more internally. That's something that you can figure out is, what's my preference in terms of how I visualize? Do I want to feel? Do I want to do more of a feel visualization where I'm not as worried about the external thing? I'm more worried about how my body feels when doing this thing. Or do I want to visualize more externally? Do I want to see myself having external success, hitting a double in the gap, striking a guy out, making a diving play, stealing a bag? Do I want to see those things? Do I want to think more about the mechanics of what I'm doing? That's a personal preference. There's no right or wrong answer for that. Some of you might prefer one over the other. You kind of have to experiment with both and see what makes you feel better. And it might be related a little bit to what your focus is in practice. If you're hitting in the cages, are you focused more on trying to drive the ball to the back of the cage or hit a spot in the cage? Or are you more focused internally about what your swing is doing? Right? That's kind of self preference. So using it as a pre-game routine supplement can be really, really effective. One of the hardest things, but I think one of the most effective, is trying to figure out how to use it in game. Now, between pitches, there's probably not enough time to really do that. You got 12 to 15, maybe 20 seconds. You're not going to have enough time to really go through a visualization, but in between innings can be a really useful tool. We talk with our guys quite a bit at TJ about building your pre-at-bat routine, right? So we want our guys really focused on their at-bat at the minimum when they're in the hole. But ideally, they're doing it as soon as first pitch happens. So the only players that can't do this more are the first three batters of the game. After that, everybody can build their routine to a different degree. First three batters of the game are kind of pinched just because of where they are in the order and how the game sets up. But everyone after that, we can really build out a pretty extensive pre-at-bat script where, if you're 5 batters away, maybe I'm focused more on what the pitcher's doing and trying to understand sequences and things like that. Maybe when we get in the hole or on deck, I'm not necessarily focused on what the pitcher is doing anymore. I'm focused on what I need to do. I may be visualizing what my at-bat's going to look like based on the information that I have about what this sequence might be, right? So maybe when I'm on deck, I'm more internal with my visualization. I'm thinking about myself or, visualizing the success that I want to have, what I want the ball to do, rather than focus more on what the pitcher is doing. That might work for some, that might not work for others. So building out how this can be useful between at-bats, between innings, can be really important. Do I want to use it early and then as I get closer to my at-bat, focus more on the pitcher? Or do I want to focus more on the pitcher and then as I'm 2 or 3 hitters away, I'm using more visualization, right? That's personal preference. Using in between innings as a pitcher, like understanding, all right, who's coming up the next 3 batters in the order? How do I want to start attacking these guys? Especially if I've seen them before, second time through the lineup. As a defender, we talked about this a lot. You're expected to be ready for 100 pitches for the 2 or 3 opportunities that you might get throughout a game. How can you maintain that focus, right? You can practice that in between innings. How can I let myself kind of reset every 15 to 20 seconds? You can visualize what that routine looks like. And then obviously post-game, kind of what Graham said, using it as a recap, like going back through at-bats. And this is where the journaling and the reflecting really comes in handy. Having that record, it doesn't have to be immediately after, but having that record of what happened, having that record of what I went through, what my experience was. So maybe later that night or the next day, I can go back through these things and really evaluate what happened. So these are all lots of different ways that you can use visualization to supplement your performance, to enhance your performance, to learn from what you just did, what you just went through. What I'll say is, again, the more you practice it, the better you're going to get at it. I think this is what happens a lot with mental skills is people think, oh, I can just do this and it's going to make me better, right? I can just do these things. You still have to practice these skills just like you would any other. So creating a structure for yourself, creating a routine for yourself about how can I do this? Can I practice this 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week? It doesn't need to be an hour and a half. Take 20 minutes, get yourself into a position where you're distraction free, right? It could be right before bed. You could use it as part of your bedtime routine before you go to sleep. What can I do to kind of reinforce the things that I went through today? We had practice today. What were our focuses, right? What were my cues that I was working on? How can I reinforce those? And again, it's part of the relearning process too. It's the recall process. Some of you, I guess the rain caused some rainouts today. But the next time you're at practice, you'll get these cues, and then the next day, it's hard to remember what you just went through because you didn't really pay attention, maybe, or you were paying attention then, but you didn't think about it again for the next week. So building this routine and building this script of how can I use these pieces to benefit my development, and visualization can be a really big piece of that if you use it properly and you commit to using it properly. What questions do y'all have about what this process looks like? Any issues that you've had with it? If you've never used it at all, like any questions about how you can use it, how you start? All right. Well, again, learn to develop this on your own. Learn to figure out how you can use this. That's going to be best for your development, best for your experience. Each one of you might use it a little bit differently, and that's okay. But start to experiment now. Utilize it through this week. Start to put it into practice in games and see what's working for you. It's not expected to be perfect from the start. So you got to play around with it a little bit. You got to experience it to see what works and what doesn't. That's all I got for you guys tonight. Remember the reflections after practice, after games. Be intentional about your development. Be intentional about how you're progressing, right? Take ownership of that stuff, and that's a good way to help. I'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Coach.